Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Scientific Biography. Today we're going to be talking about Charles Darwin, the explorer and explainer, and the guy who came up with the theory of evolution. He's a pretty important scientist, and we're going to discuss his life and his accomplishments today. So let's get started. So who exactly was Charles Darwin? Well, he was an English naturalist, geologist, and biologist, so he stayed in the natural sciences. And his best known work is his contributions to our understanding of evolutionary biology. That's what he's known for. He came up with the idea that all life on Earth comes from common ancestors with branching points where species have changed. And he called this process natural selection. These are all his major accomplishments, basically, the things that he came through and the thing that he's known best for. Darwin grew up in England to wealthy parents, and he was the fifth of six children, so he was in a large family. Charles was raised by free-thinking parents and enjoyed collecting and being in nature. His parents were educated and allowed him to think not within the confines of church thinking at the time. Darwin would attend the University of Edinburgh Medical School in 1825, and while he was there, he became really interested in taxidermy, natural history, and he studied anatomy. His father would then withdraw him from Edinburgh and send him to Cambridge, where he ended up studying geology, natural history, and anatomy. His parents weren't super thrilled with what Darwin chose to do with his life, but that's what happens when you let your son be a free thinker, I guess. They do things that you don't necessarily think they're going to do. And so he got really into geology, natural history, and anatomy. After graduation, he was invited by a friend to become the naturalist on a voyage, and so Darwin joined the trip, which would happen on the HMS Beagle. His parents were actually kind of excited about this because they didn't feel like there would be very many job prospects for a geologist or a naturalist, but he got one right away, so way to go, Darwin. The voyage would last 5 years and took Darwin all around the globe. And on the trip, Darwin would write extensive notes about the wildlife he observed. And this is an actual picture of some of his actual notes from the trip. And this is a picture of the HMS Beagle in South America. The main part of the trip that was most intriguing for the evolutionary biology standpoint was when Darwin was in the Galapagos Islands. He arrived in the Galapagos Islands and observed a number of different birds that were like those he had seen in Chile on the mainland, but differed slightly from island to island. And as you can see here, these are his drawings of these different birds. Later, Darwin would propose that these birds had all originally come from the same place, but had adapted to the islands they now lived on. And he explained that the differences in beak size and shape were due to the food source for the birds on the islands. So basically what he's saying is that a group of these finches, or birds, right, who lived in Chile, and then flew to these islands, and different groups of them moved to the different islands. So we had one that went to island 1, one group that went to island 2, a group that went to island 3, and a group that went to island 4. And on each island, there were different food sources that the birds could eat. So maybe on this one, they had big, thicker, like nuts to eat. This one might have been like a different kind of fruit. This one might have been like a flower nectar, whatever. But all of these birds, right, all came from the same ancestor. They came from that same original place, but they had to change based on the food they were trying to eat. So that's what Darwin noticed or kind of came up with based on his observations. So he ended up relaying his findings on natural selection, as he called it, in his book on the origin of species, which kind of outlines how species should be able to adapt and change based on environmental pressures, right? Things that are happening around them are going to change how they need to survive so they can continue to survive and reproduce. Individuals with desirable traits would live longer and reproduce more because they had traits that helped them live longer. And they would pass on those desirable traits because they were the ones who were reproducing the most. Less desirable traits would be wiped out over time since they wouldn't be able to live as long or reproduce as much. This theory of natural selection would eventually become the theory of evolution when we had more evidence to back up his claims. So let's talk a little bit about what evolution is exactly, since Darwin kind of came up with the basis of it. Evolution is the idea that species change over time due to selective pressures. This is something that we have actually been able to see in smaller groupings through experiments. So we can see that this does actually happen. These pressures could be limited food supply, different types of predators, isolation from another group, or climate change. All these things could potentially change the way a species needs to survive and change the traits that are needed to survive. These pressures cause animals with less desirable traits to die, leaving the individuals with desirable traits to reproduce. And therefore, after several generations, this group could become a new species with new traits that are slightly different than the original. That doesn't mean that the original species is gone. They could still survive in the original place that they were or in the original conditions, but this new species is more adapted to the new pressures that have been brought onto them. We have lots of different evolution evidence that we can point to back up Darwin's theories. There have been plenty of studies that have supported his natural selection and evolutionary biology in general. The first thing is homologous structures, which is that every living mammal has similar structures in them, and you can see really great pictures of that. So, for instance, whales, primates, horses, all these different animals, right, have the same kind of wingspan, the same kind of bone structure in their arms. It's a really cool picture to see side by side. There's also a lot of DNA evidence that supports this. So now that molecular biology is a thing, we have a lot of DNA evidence showing that DNA is actually really similar between most living things. And just as you get more and more complex, there's more and more added to it, but the basic mechanisms of life are the same, whether you're a simple single-celled organism or a human. All of those basic genetic code is similar. 3, there's a global distribution of organisms, which shows that over time, right, from this one common place, animals have spread out and changed. The fossil record gives us bone structures and DNA through archaeology and paleontology that also supports Darwin's theories. And then, of course, we're able to see direct observation of small-scale changes, which has been dubbed microevolution. And you can even do that in labs. So when you go to basically like a four-year university and you're studying biology or medicine, you'll have to take a biology class, and you might take a laboratory that goes over microevolution. So that you might do something with like fruit flies or something that doesn't have a very long lifespan, right? So you can see many generations in a quick amount of time. There are lots of observable phenomenon that can be attributed to natural selection, and scientists have not found contradictory evidence yet. One of the most obvious ones might be selective breeding. We've done that with horses and dogs for millennia, and we still do it, and we've created different species that way. Of course, with any big idea like this, there's always going to be a little bit of controversy, and his ideas have proven to be controversial. Science generally consensus on it, but outside of the scientific circle, people disagree. Religious groups in particular have found offense to Darwin's ideas since it refutes the Christian view of creation. It says that God did not create everything right all at once, but it says that humanity and creatures and animals have all kind of slowly changed over time, and that means that there's no God had nothing to do with it. In the United States, for example, there have been lots of pushes to ban Darwin's theory from schools, some of them having been successful while others have not been. And this controversy isn't slowing down. It's going to continue for the foreseeable future. It's still happening. Overall, though, Charles Darwin's legacy and his work has helped set the foundation for our understanding of biology. And his idea for natural selection, combined with what we now know about genetics, has brought biology so far forward, and we understand so much more about the natural world because of his ideas. That being said, due to the controversy around his ideas, there are parts of the world where Darwin's name and ideas aren't really seen for what they are. An excellent summation of observations and data that has guided evolutionary biology. Regardless, though, Darwin has helped shape the modern world with his work, and his ideas have spawned different social viewpoints, political policy, all sorts of different things, right? So Darwin has a strong legacy on our planet, even if people don't view him as a good thing. Thank you all so much for watching this scientific biography. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about scientists or different people who have influenced the world. If there's someone in particular you want to learn about that I haven't covered yet, go ahead and comment on the video, and I'll try to make a video of that person as soon as possible so you can learn about the people you want to learn about. Until next time, keep learning and keep doing science. See you later.